Some of the most compelling stories about Africa are about man-eating lions. In the 1890s, there were a pair of maneless male man-eating lions, which were called The Ghost in the Darkness. The movie that was made, The Ghost in the Darkness, is based on those lions. And the person that killed them was a railway engineer, a Colonel John Patterson. But lion attacks in Victorian times are not the only times that you hear about lion attacks. A century later, in the 1990s, 1991 specifically, in July, there was a man-eating lion here at Mfuwe. At least one man-eating lion here at Mfuwe. There may have been a couple of more, but one in particular. This one in July attacked two boys. One was killed, the other one escaped. And immediately a bait was put out to try to catch the lion, but to no avail. And then about a month later, there was another attack. This one wasn't two small children going out on the highway. It was of a woman at her home. Now, she was mentally impaired, but the door had been broken through. Now, it happens that I ran into someone who knows about that attack. Now, he's my guide here. His name is Malawa. And Malama was about 15 years old at the time of the attack. We're at Mfuwe, and the specific place that we're at is the Flat Dogs Camp. And this is my guide, Malama. And where were you at in 1991?
In 1991, I was within Mfuwe in a village called Element Village. I possibly don't even know where my grandparents got this English name as Element Village.
Element Village?
Element Village. That's the village I'm actually still living up to date.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you, in 1991, there was a man-eating lion in this area, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Tell me about the lion.
Of course, because most of the sightings, whoever saw the lions saw them or saw it in the night. Therefore, it was so difficult for an ordinary person to know whether it was a female or a lion, a male lion. Yeah. Closer to my village, that's where we heard what we saw as this woman who was killed, and possibly this woman was slightly had a mental problem. Yeah. And that morning, when we learned of the woman being taken, we thought she was just killed and left. But personally, I was about 15 years old then.
15?
15. We went to the house. I remember very, very well, peeped into the house, and what we saw was where she was sleeping was nicely laid, which indicated that the woman might have been outside the house at the time when the lion was stalking her. And when she was like just getting into the house, because what happened was halfway the door was destroyed. Destroyed. You know, the door was a packed maize stalk. It was not a timber door.
It wasn't a heavy door.
It wasn't a heavy door. And that was a traditional door in the villages then. So halfway, that's where the door was broken. So most people thought that the woman was outside the house, and when maybe she saw the lion very close up, that's when she thought of retreating by getting into the house.
Yes.
Which was too late for her. Yeah. She was possibly then, I think in late 40s, early 50s at the time she was killed. So she couldn't possibly run faster enough to get into the house. That is why where she was sleeping was nicely laid down. The door shutter was just a small part broken, possibly where or when she was fighting with the lion. So that's how she was put out of the house.
I've heard that. Is there anything else that you can remember about the lion that you would like to tell us?
Well, anything, of course, it had a mixed feeling that time. And remember, you know, we were in a community that had a huge mix of illiterate and literate people. Some people believed that that was just a made lion. Yes, some people through practicing witchcraft made the lion.
Yeah.
That's what most, you know, oldish people believed. And that is why when we were told that there are people on the ground hunting the lion, we were told the other morning that they saw the lion, but they didn't kill it because they just saw one lion that night, and the hunters wanted to see all of them together before they decide, before they try and eradicate them. Then because it was just one on that night, a lot of oldish people said it's impossible to kill the lion because the lion knew that he was hunted and just managed to blind the hunters and disappear. But then later on, after some maybe 2 days, we were told that the lion was killed. Personally, I went to school that day when they killed the lion because they drove it somewhere nearby the villages to make sure that they tell people, to make sure that they instill
so that
confidence in
knew
people
that the
lion
was
has
dead.
been killed.
Yes.
I missed that. I was in school. By the time I came, well, the news was spread out, and we were happy we could go back to our daily activities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for talking to me.
That's a pleasure.
The second attack, there was a third attack, and once again, this was a boy walking around. But in this particular case, he was walking around behind a park ranger station. And when the lion attacked him, the park ranger discovered the attack very quickly, ran out and shot, but he, of course, didn't kill the lion, he just scared it away. The boy was badly injured. As a matter of fact, he was hospitalized the next day, but he died of his injuries. So that means that there's a witness to this particular attack, a credible witness, the park ranger. And the park ranger saw that it was a maneless lion, and therefore he assumed it was female. In fact, of course, they discovered later on it was a maneless male lion. They set out traps after each one of these, called in professional hunters, and tried very, very hard to get rid of the lion. But there were 3 more attacks that we know of. There were at least 6 documented attacks. The last attack is the one that is perhaps most interesting. And when it was going on, there was an American by the name of Hosek. He was boarding an airplane in Los Angeles. And he had a license to kill lions in Zambia. The 6th victim was an elderly woman who had been sitting in her doorway of her mud and wattle hut. She was drinking some beer at sunset and enjoying the breeze. Her neighbors had already barricaded themselves inside their homes, and she didn't see the male lion until it was too late, of course. When government scouts investigated the next day, they found blood-stained sand on the doorstep of her house and 7-inch paw prints that indicated a very large lion. Now, at this time, they left the area, but the lion returned to the scene of the crime. And in broad daylight, he pushed the door open to her house
and he seized a gunny sack that she had in her house that contained her laundry. And he carried the bag to the center of the small village. The lion dropped the bag, stood over it, and began to roar. Now that would be alarming at any time, but the lion's fearless domination amplified all the human fears and vulnerabilities, and he was identified as a sorcerer in the minds of the village elders. The lion continued to carry the closed bag about for several days, playing with it as a cat does with a dead mouse or catnip. Each day, the villagers would encounter the bag at a different spot along the river beside the town. They were powerless and demoralized, and they sealed themselves in their houses until Wayne Hosek came.
And so when he landed, he was invited to hunt this particular lion. And he did. And after a considerable amount of time, he and a park ranger were able to shoot at it. The park ranger only grazed the leg with his rifle, but Wayne killed it. Now, they didn't go out of their hide immediately after they shot the lion. And the reason, of course, is because they weren't certain the lion was dead, and you wouldn't want to go out immediately to investigate. But after a little while, they heard a gurgle, and that was the last of the lion, the Mfuwe lion.
Although Hosek was from Los Angeles, he grew up in Chicago, and as a boy he went to the Field Museum in Chicago, and the Field Museum he knew was where the stuffed Ghost and Darkness were, the lions that had terrorized Kenya back in the 1890s. And so he arranged to have the body of the Mfuwe lion taken to the Chicago Field Museum, where it's on display today and you can see it there.
This inevitably brings up the question of why the Mfuwe lion, or any lion for that matter, becomes a man-eater. One of the theories is that the man-eater became a man-eater because people are easy to catch and fairly easy to eat. It's the injured animal theory, and usually that has something to do with the condition of the teeth and the jaw of the lion. And so because the Ghost and the Darkness and the Mfuwe lion are in the Field Museum, those skeletons could easily be investigated. And sure enough, the Mfuwe lion did have damage on the right side of his jaw. It looks like some large hooved animal probably kicked him in the jaw, and it never really healed properly. However, the investigation also showed that that accident had happened a long time before the Mfuwe lion started eating people. So it's questionable that the injury itself is a sufficient explanation for why he became a man-eater.